Christmas, Chelsea fans. What an embarrassment that was. Arsenal 3, Chelsea 1 full time. Trying to give you a rational perspective, but that was absolutely embarrassing. It really was. I don't like to use overly dramatic terms for speaking about Chelsea in football because I think a lot of people are like always at a 10, whether things are good or bad, like over dramatizing everything around football at this point. But to me, that was absolutely hopeless and abysmal from Chelsea for 99.9% of that game. You know, I think for the last little bit where it looked like maybe Chelsea could spring up a miracle comeback on Boxing Day at the Emirates. Other than that, it was awful. It really was. The worst Chelsea performance I've seen since Sheffield United in July. That was absolutely awful. That was embarrassing. This was awful and embarrassing. I think, Frank Lampard will rightly be getting a lot of criticism tonight, as any Chelsea manager after this performance would, in terms of, I think, the way the team went out in that game, you have to ask questions. It's very easy for me to sit here as a fan of Lampard and say, and look at just instantly blame all the players, right? Why was the mentality of the players weren't right? But then you always have to be objective and say, who's the guy sending them out there? Especially in the second half as well. The way Chelsea performed for a majority of that second half, Chelsea only really properly got going in like the last 5 minutes of the game, or at least looked a little bit more dangerous, at least, or some urgency from more than like two players. You have to question Lampard as well on that. At half time, 2-0 down, you expect a rollicking, you expect him to and reinstill some sort of mentality and standards going into that second half. But the way Chelsea went out, conceded another goal in really poor circumstances, even though it was a bit of a freak goal, and just the way we could have conceded 4, 5 and 6 in that game, I just think it was embarrassing and it was abject. And I think the lack of life in that performance, you not only going to look at individuals tonight, but also the manager. The team is a reflection of the manager. And for some parts this season, I think for a lot of the time this season, I felt positive about that. But tonight, absolutely awful. And it reminded me, unfortunately, and this is concerning, of bad performances under Sarri, bad performances under Conte, a repeat of performances I've seen since 16-17 that, to me, I think is always going to hurt Chelsea. And in terms of us talking about being a serious title challenger, I mean, you have to put that to bed, at least for now, because in terms of what we're doing at the moment, in terms of 3 defeats in 4 in the Premier League, it's not a good look at a key part of the season when I see other teams who maybe struggled at the start of the year, like Man United, starting to gain some form. And there are so many teams up there who, with quality, and losing games like tonight against a team in really awful form going into this game with such a lack of confidence is awful. It's a bad look, and it's going to dent the confidence of that squad. So I think all round tonight, there has to be blame. I also think blame to Lampard for me, the second half, in the sense that Callum was making a difference after coming off the bench at 2-0 down and then 3-0 down. But why keep crossing the ball into the box, especially at height from Reece and Callum, when you don't have Olivier Giroud on the pitch? To me, it just made no sense. If that's our only tactic to get back into this game, and that is a key tactic to the way Chelsea play, but we have some brilliant crossers. So I don't think crossing is a negative, but when you don't have Giroud, who you want in that situation on the pitch, who can really thrive off those crosses, and you're not bringing him on when you make a double change at halftime, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It really doesn't. And it was so irritating to watch that and just feel, and then not even see Giroud come on for the third sub as well. That was Kai Havertz. I think a lot of the time we talk about tactics and formation and where players are on the pitch and sort of, could we be in a better formation, or that has been discussed, post Wolves and Everton. But I think when I see such a massive underperformance, it's very hard for me to just go tactics, formation. There's something deeper to it, or at least you have to go, we just had an absolutely awful night and too many players underperformed. For Arsenal, a lot of players performed. The majority of their team performed pretty well tonight. They had some brilliant performers in Martinelli, in Saka, in Xhaka, had one of his best games for a while with that amazing free kick. But, I still expect levels from Chelsea. And this Chelsea side is good enough to go to Arsenal, even at their best, and put up a better showing than that. It was absolutely embarrassing and abject. I think you can look at the 3 goals on the night for Arsenal and sort of explain them away or make excuses for them. The first one, is it really a penalty? But I throw back and say, why is Reece James putting in a challenge at that position? He's lost out to Tierney. Why are you putting yourself in a position where you can concede a penalty? Firstly. Second, it's an amazing free kick by Xhaka. It truly is, thunderbolt free kick. I know some people were having a go at Mendy. He had a poor night tonight. I felt just maybe in decision making in the third goal. He nearly gives away a fourth embarrassingly to Lacazette. But, that one, it's a thunderstrike. My issue is, us giving away the free kick in that position in the first place. You know, N'Golo Kante, who had a really off night tonight, was for me terrible, one of Chelsea's worst performers, being subbed off for Kai Havertz later in the game. Why are you giving away the free kick there? You know, Chelsea have to get into half time at least 1-0 down, and then maybe reassess things. But 2-0 down, that's always a massive hurdle to overcome. The third goal, yes, is almost a freak goal from Saka. You know, it really is. And if it's intended, it's a wonderful finish from him. My issue was, once again, in the run-up to that goal, the lack of urgency and intense closing down from Chelsea players to Saka to allow him to get that space. Too many times Arsenal players easily getting into our box, and it was just awful to witness over and over again. And I think, you know, you look at the players for that, their mentality, their organisation on the pitch individually, but also the coach for not, you know, reinstilling that in the second half, or not trying to change things radically to stop that in the second half. But I just think all round it was absolutely abysmal. I think, you know, got to give credit to, I think, 2 players tonight who impressed me, who can come out of this game with some credit. Callum Hudson-Odoi and Christian Pulisic. I felt Callum did himself some big favours tonight in terms of his performance coming off the bench and setting up the goal for Tammy Abraham. Tammy now has 3 goals in 2, which is good for him. But for me, Callum really showing that directness that unfortunately not a lot of Chelsea players had tonight. And maybe without Hakim Ziyech, who is getting bigger and bigger in terms of his importance to this team as every game goes by in terms of creatively. You're seeing from there a player for me in Callum who really wants to take his opportunity now for Frank, and I think he'll get that against Aston Villa, where I think he'll actually start that game. I think it'd be amazing if he doesn't start that game. I think it'd be truly stupid if he doesn't start, because he was so good tonight. So I think Callum deserves that credit, and maybe a good chance for him to get into the first team and maybe become a regular starter under Lampard, which he struggled to do so far. Christian Pulisic, he must hate playing Arsenal, because you know, I felt once again tonight he was offering that energy, offering that directness, especially in central areas. He's so dangerous and so hard to stop. You know, Arsenal players having to commit fouls sometimes against him. But unfortunately, you know, he was almost a one-man show out there trying to do things just by himself in terms of the movement and the energy from his fellow Chelsea players, unfortunately. It was no surprise to me that he was kind of involved in that consolation goal at the end. You know, great trickery, great feat. So for me, you know, if Ziyech is not fit, you know, him and Callum should be starting on the wings for me against Aston Villa, you know. So I guess those 2 players can go out of this game with some credit. But overall, it's you can't get away. This is an embarrassing night for Chelsea. It really is. It's a massive setback for Chelsea in their sort of hopes for this season in terms of where we go from here. The shame of it, you know, 48 hours between games always looked bad. And I think just generally it is for fatigue and fitness for the players, the level of performance. But I think in some ways after tonight, I think it's actually a positive that Chelsea have a game so quickly after, in terms of being able to sort of, you know, reflect on that game, not as much, you know, in terms of maybe getting out on the pitch and getting a win against Aston Villa. But that's not going to be easy against this current Villa side. I don't know where we go from here, really, in terms of, you know, the mentality of these players. Being able to put in a performance of this level, this low level, is really concerning going into the second half of the season, you know, because you lack trust in this team now that they can put in awful displays like this in big games. Because tonight was a big game, you know, despite all the stuff I heard pre-game about Arsenal and about Chelsea. You know, going away to Arsenal is one of Chelsea's biggest games of the season, and the fact that no player for me other than Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi really turned up tonight was just really disappointing. So absolutely awful. Fingers crossed Chelsea can turn it round, but I'm sure you guys will vent in the comments. Please go and do that. Share me your concerns and thoughts about tonight. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. Enjoy the rest of your Christmas if you can, even after this abysmal horror show from Chelsea. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again.